Welcome back, Honors. All right, so great job today. Very excited with the work that y'all are doing. The quizzes were solid. Got kids coming in already asking me about their artworks. Do they have enough? 9 times out of 10, you do have enough, right? So I was talking to Colleen about it this morning. Your best strategy for finding your information is maybe watch a YouTube video to get a decent base, right? And then find an article to read a little bit more in depth. And then third, just Google your artwork, fun facts, right? And so and just find those really interesting facts that'll kind of grab people and pull them in so they can understand why their artwork or your artwork that you're doing is just so good, right? So, and remember, don't overwhelm yourself. The presentation is literally meant to last about, give or take, 5-7 minutes at the most, right? Because we do have to get through as many of them as we possibly can. All right, so when you come in, we are going to review very quickly, all right, super dummy quick, and we're going to get straight into those artworks, right? Because we do have a lot of crazy stuff coming up, okay? So your next test is going to be next Friday, okay? And you are going to have a quiz next week on the artworks themselves, okay? So we are going to have to kind of buckle down and get to a point where we're not reviewing super heavy in class as much. We are, but we're not, you know what, it'll be fine though. I promise you it'll be okay. We're going to get it all done. We're going to do fine. We're going to murder this thing. It's going to be good stuff. All right? So anyway, let's get into it though, okay? So big things to start off with. We talked about this in class. We talked about what makes the artwork of the Renaissance era so different from the artwork of the Middle Ages era, right? Well, big thing about it is the artwork of the Renaissance era is going to be much more stylized. It's going to represent humans and landscapes, just like the Vitruvian Man in that, that we talked about on your quiz, right? That right there is humanism at its best, Renaissance artwork at its best. We want to make sure when we're painting the Mona Lisa or Mary or Christ or whoever that we're making them look like an authentic human being, right? An actual real life person, a humanist figure, okay? Now, big things though going forward also are going to be perspective. You're going to have real life art. Depth, proportion, shading is going to make the art look more textured and real. Sculptors are going to study human anatomy as well, okay? So this right here, just to give you an understanding of why the Renaissance is called rebirth. And y'all, a lot of y'all did this question, or actually all y'all had to do this question on your last test for the Middle Ages, right? Well, look at Augustus right here, okay? Augustus, the statue of Augustus represents this entire thing perfectly, okay? This is a product of the Roman era. This is a Pax Romana statue. This is a period of Roman golden age and growth, right? So, and then this right here, that's the Middle Ages art, okay? Look at the difference. Look at the heavy difference. Look at the fully formed, proportional human figure using symbolism, because that right there is Cupid trying to show impetus of the divine, right? Like trying to show that the divine characteristics of the gods are with Augustus. And then you have this from the Middle Ages that's just like, oh, hey, there's a little guy wearing a crown, and there's a big guy wearing a crown, and all these guys have the same face, and they're just varying heights, and it's not 3D, it's 2D. It's pretty bad, right? And then it kept advancing forward. This is like high Middle Ages art. So it did start to get a little bit better. You're going to see gilding in the background. You're going to see some things like that during the Middle Ages, but still the downfalls of it are this doesn't look very humanistic. This doesn't look very real life. We've got a very large forehead on baby Jesus and a very funky looking face on Mary. So, but it is a step forward. But then this is the Renaissance, right? Look at that. Look at that. You're seeing the genuine rebirth of Roman sculpture in the Renaissance, right? This is one of the trials of Hercules when he actually beats the centaur, right? And I can't remember who made this, but this is actually in the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, okay? And that is a Renaissance piece of art right there. This one right here that one of you has, right? The Birth of Venus by Botticelli. Also, rebirth. These are Greek and Roman gods that we're actually seeing in this thing. So that is why the Renaissance is called the rebirth era. That is why the Renaissance is called what it is. And you're also going to see heavy use of this with architecture. Also, right? And you're going to see integration of Christian themes. So it's going to be a very big era of taking all the things that happened during the Middle Ages and making them better, right? Using those Greek and Roman ideas and surging them forward, okay? Now, architecture, also known as the social art because it's supposed to belong to everyone and things like that, okay? Now, the social art did away with the Gothic style, right? Like looking at Gothic architecture right here, as you can see, it's very rigid. It's very pointy, it's very vaulted ceilings, flying buttresses, singular stone construction, very kind of monotone, very big, very looming, very rah, rah, rah. And this is from the High Middle Ages, yeah? So, but the Renaissance architecture is going to bring back arches, pillars, domes that hadn't been seen since the fall of Rome, right? Believed to be more clean, less disorderly, right? So this right here is another artwork one of you are specializing in. That right there, look at this building. This building is half Gothic on the front because the first half was actually done in the High Middle Ages, right? Or the High and Late Middle Ages. And then the back half of it is a Renaissance building. You can see the clear divide between the architectural styles. Look at this Gothic look up here, and then look at this Renaissance look right here. It's almost if you just like blocked it out, you would be like, oh, that's from ancient Rome, right? So like, no, well, that is Brunelleschi's dome, and that's also in Florence as well. Still to this day, one of the tallest standing buildings in Florence, and it also is a gorgeous city. It's trapped in time. If you ever get a chance, you gotta go. All right, so, and then also on the inside of the dome is this amazing fresco, okay, which actually has a very intense picture of the devil eating someone, which we'll talk about that here in about 2 seconds. So really though, going forward though, you have to also understand that it's not just architecture. It's not just sculpture. It's not just frescoes. Not just art. Not just learning. It's also writing, okay? Like, so you have to really, really like grapple with this thing and really kind of break it down and understand that writing is going to be one of the central pillars of the Renaissance, okay? And the next five guys that are going to be popping up are all on your test, okay? The next five guys are all in the matching section and all on your test, and one of them in particular, or two of them in particular actually, are heavily referenced throughout the test, okay? And I will let you know who those guys are, but you do need to go ahead and star all of these guys because they are all on your test in the matching section up front, okay? So, writings is going to be a big thing though. Writers are going to start to kind of do away with this whole middle age thing about like just writing about theology or just trying to understand things introspectively or just trying to understand things on a minimalist level. And they're going to instead try to expand on it and be like, what about blending Greek philosophy with Christianity? What about writing scholarly articles? What about writing guidebooks for men and women to achieve success? And the big guy that emerges as the first like writer of the Renaissance era, even though he's technically from the late Middle Ages period, is St. Thomas Aquinas. So St. Thomas Aquinas, so you could honestly say that the church was the only real place or vestige of really hardcore intelligence left in Europe during the Middle Ages. So, of course, where is your first writer going to come from? Where, in fact, the church, right? So the church is going to produce the very first humanistic writer of the late Middle Ages leading into the Renaissance, okay? And his name was St. Thomas Aquinas, right? He is going to do a lot of amazing things. But the big things he does is he led to the birth of scholasticism, right? So, because he takes Aristotle's works, right? And he takes this Greek and Roman philosophy, and he has it translated, and then he blends that with the ideas of the Christian church, and he begins to ask questions, which is a very humanistic idea, right? Humanism is going to be seen in St. Thomas Aquinas' writings before the Renaissance, some historians even argue, technically began, right? So, for example, he had writings that were like on the soul, right? Where he argued or like really, really grappled with the idea of what is the soul, right? What is the soul? Is it corporeal, non-corporeal? Does it exist here? Is it with me now? Does it exist someplace else? And he kind of really just expanded on these ideas, right? He did a work on Aristotle, right? Trying to discuss like empirical learning and how that can be applied to faith and things like that. Now, really interesting thing as well, okay? Jot this down. Scholasticism under St. Thomas Aquinas is going to lead to monasteries and convents being centrally located areas where people went to go and learn. And so what are monasteries and convents going to turn into as time progresses? That is exactly right, Aaron Hill. That is exactly right. Universities, right? So you could say that St. Thomas Aquinas kind of led to the birth of some of the earliest large universities. Now, universities already existed technically. The very first one was the University of Bologna, which was actually in Italy, and it popped up around the 1060s. But the idea of St. Thomas Aquinas making monasteries and convents areas for concentrated learning, you're going to see the growth of universities surge forward following him. Right? So the birth of scholasticism also, we say that St. Thomas Aquinas is the patron saint of the learned, right? So the birth of scholasticism is going to come around, and we're going to basically be like, we should be trying all the time to be as intelligent as we possibly can be. Thank you, big dumb ox, which is what he was referred to as because he was apparently so big and so strong and so large, and also a very quiet, mild-mannered guy. A lot of people gave him the nickname the big dumb ox, right? So, but actually, wasn't that dumb. It's actually wicked smart. All right, so now look, going forward though, then you have this guy. Woo, starring, highlighting, circling, make it look like it's exploding, all kinds of stuff, right? So Dante Aglieri, right? So Dante Aglieri is going to be probably one of the two most famous humanistic writers from the Renaissance period, right? Dante is going to arrive in the early 1300s, right? And he is going to bring back the biggest and baddest thing that everyone has seen, that no one has seen in hundreds of years, right? So we're talking about epic poetry in the form of a fictional story, right? So we are seeing Dante reemerge, bringing back poetry and epic literature at the end of the Middle Ages, right? And I mean epic literature as in the journey of an individual through many trials and tribulations to find their set goal, right? Now, his most famous work is this bad boy right here, the Divine Comedy, which, really interestingly enough, was written in, what was it? Italian. Wait a minute, what was everything written in before Dante really started his work? Now, some English teachers will argue and be like, well, Chaucer wrote his stuff in English. And yeah, calm down. All right, so but I'm talking about Dante right now, okay? So Dante, if he writes this text in Italian, that means he's writing it in a language that he knows people can read and write in, and he knows people can understand, right? So what that's called is using, write this down, vernacular language. Vernacular, okay? So he's bringing back vernacular literature, right? Italians who know how to speak Italian can learn to read Italian and now can actually read this story without having to be a priest or a monk or a nun that can only read Latin, right? So, this is epic. This is huge, right? He's bringing back these contextual ideas. Now, his story is very important, okay? You need to jot this down. His story of the Divine Comedy is one of the most famous stories that has ever existed in Western civilization's history, bar none, okay? It is broken into 3 sections, right? 3 sections that are made up of these things called cantos, right? So really quick, let's double check and tell how many cantos are in are in the Divine Comedy. I know it's a derivative of 3. So the poem consists of 100 cantos, which are grouped together in sections of 3, or canticles. Okay, so now look. So it's 100 different verses, right? A very long poem, but it's broken into 3 sections. And here are the 3 sections, right? He goes through the Inferno, Purgatory, and Heaven, right? So, or Paradise, or Il Paradiso is what everybody refers to it as. Now, what is going on in this story, though? Y'all are like, Mr. Terry, what are you talking about? This guy's talking about heaven and hell and all this stuff. Well, in the story, the way it goes, okay, is that Dante apparently awoke in a dream state, right? He wakes up, he's in a forest, and he's walking around, and he's in this misty haze, and he really can't see anything, right? He's like, I don't know what's going on. Now, remember, this is a fictionalized story. This is something he made up, right? Some people say that he saw it in a dream. Some people say that he saw it someplace else, or that he just conjured it. But he says that he awoke, right? And he's just walking around through this forest. And in the story, he is the main character, right? So he's walking around, and all of a sudden he hears this voice in the distance just go, Dante. And he knows this voice, and this voice is like, Beatrice, and Beatrice is the woman that he was going to be married to, but then she unfortunately died, right? So it was his long-lost love, which ironically enough, he was married by the time this was released, which I find really funny. Imagine being the wife of the guy that just released one of the most famous works of literature, and you're not even in it. But really quickly, though, she starts trying to find this voice, and he goes to the base of a mountain, and he looks upon this mountain. He's like, I got to climb this mountain. I got to get to this voice. I got to find Beatrice. And all of a sudden, coming running down the mountain is a wolf, a leopard, and a lion. And they're like, no! And they tell him to back up, right? And then out of nowhere, he hears a voice behind him. He's like, don't worry, Dante. I'll guide you through this incredible journey we're about to go on. And he turns around. And y'all know how I am about Caesar, right? I mean, look, the guy is literally on my desk, right? So y'all know how I am about Caesar. Dante's not like that about Caesar, but he is like that about somebody, and the guy's name is Virgil. For all my Latin kids, you probably read some of the Aeneid in your Latin class, right? Virgil is a very famous Roman poet who was dead hundreds of years, probably more than 1,000 years before Dante was even alive, right? So, but he's still a very famous poet, and when he sees him, he's like, and he fanboys and freaks out, and Virgil tells him, Dante, I am going to lead you through the afterlife so we can go find your long-lost love, Beatrice, right? And he's like, you're going to lead me through the afterlife? He's like, yeah, I'm going to take you through the 3 levels of the afterlife. We're going to go through hell, we're going to go through the mountain of purgatory, and we're going to go to paradise, and we're going to go meet God and talk to him and all this other stuff. And so it's a very big epic tale, right, of him journeying through those places. And the most famous one is the one known as the Inferno, which is, of course, the levels of hell, right? So this right here is the drawing of hell right here, which actually has 9 circles, right? 9 circles of hell. And they all descend down, and as you keep getting lower and lower and lower into hell, the sins keep getting worse and worse and worse, right? So on this very first layer of hell, like right up here, apparently that's called limbo, right? Which is no one's really being punished. They're just kind of there because they didn't receive God's grace. They were never baptized. So you have all these really, really awesome historical figures that are in limbo, like Aristotle and Plato and Caesar. So like when I die, I kind of hope I end up, I guess, in the first layer of hell, because then I get to be able to meet Caesar, which would be pretty dope. But yeah, that's limbo, right? That's where they start. And then they continue to go down, and Charon, the boatman from Greek mythology, ferries them across the river, and they start getting into like the second layer of hell, which is for the lustful, where all the hot people from ancient Greece are, right? So ancient Greece and Rome, and they're getting blown around by strong winds right here, okay? And then they keep continuing down, and as they keep going down, the sins get more violent, and they get more aggressive until they get to this place called the Wall of Dis, right? So it's the city of Dis, and they end up going in through there, and they see a lot of guys getting aggressively punished. And Dante uses this actually to kind of make light of things and to be kind of a jerk. He put a lot of Greeks in hell and actually put a lot of Romans in heaven, because he had a huge affection for the Romans and he thought the Greeks were a bunch of pagans, right? So he puts a lot, like he has Alexander the Great dying in a blood river, right? He's got King Minos, right? Like being the guy that's like being tangled up by a snake, and he's looking at everybody that's coming through the second layer of hell, right? Like he's got all these crazy things, but down here at the very, very bottom is the most interesting one. That right down there is the devil, right? So now, interestingly enough, it was not until the 1600s that everyone started to think of the devil as a person that rules over hell, or leads over hell, or controls hell, right? So in Dante's Inferno, in the Divine Comedy, it's actually Dante and the devil, all right? So there's an engraving that you can see. He actually shows him being the person as the most punished in hell, right? So if you look at this bad boy right here, this is an engraving that is based off of Dante's version of Satan, right? So if you look at the engraving, though, this is this devil, and here is Dante and Virgil standing on the precipice of the ninth circle of hell, right? And they're down here, and there's a giant block of ice. So ironically enough, the worst levels of hell are actually cold, right, according to Dante. And in this giant block of ice, the people who have done the worst sin of all time are being punished. And that sin, apparently, according to Dante, is for betrayers, mutineers, and backstabbers. Anybody that has betrayed anyone ends up in the lowest circle of hell with the ultimate betrayer himself, because he betrayed God, right, and then was cast down into hell. So apparently, if you know the story, Lucifer was also known as a very beautiful angel, right? Golden-haired angel with huge wings, and was a very, very beautiful person. And apparently, what had happened is he defies God, wages a war, and God takes him by the throat after St. Michael the Archangel defeats him in battle and casts him down into hell. And that's what made the layers of hell. It's the pit that when he hit the ground and went into the earth, it was like, go, 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 go. And that's what actually created the layer of hell. And then on the other side of the world went, beep, like, so it was this little mountain that popped out on the other side. It was the mountain of purgatory. Now, over here, though, this is the block of ice that the devil is frozen in. He's frozen all the way up until his chest, right? And he's got 3 sets of bat wings, and every time he tries to flap to get out, it like actually constricts him more and makes him more in pain. And as you can see, all these little things right around here, those are people frozen in the ice. And as he gets closer and closer to the devil, he realizes that people are frozen deeper and deeper down in the ice block, right? So, but when he gets to the devil, he sees the fact that the devil has 3 faces, right? One here, one here, one here. And they're eating people constantly. There are 3 people that he will consume and eat, and then they just pop back up on the ice, and he does it again and again. And they're the 3 biggest betrayers in all of history. It's Brutus and Cassius, the guys that stabbed Caesar, R.I.P. And then also the third one is Judas, who is being eaten in the front, right? So this is a really interesting story, and I could talk about this for days, right? Days I could talk about Dante, because like that's a very cool story. And purgatory is really, really cool, and paradise it's fine. Apparently he sees God, and God's like a book with rainbows and rings surrounding it and all this other stuff. Now, anyway, but a lot of that stuff is referenced for the rest of this course. I'm not kidding. Like, for the rest of Western civilization, we will bring Dante back up, okay? Now, Petrarch is another really big one. This guy is considered the father of humanism, right? Francesco Petrarch, okay? And in 1341, he's going to become heavily, heavily active. And a lot of historians consider his writings as like one of the foundations of the Renaissance. He's considered the father of humanism, okay? Because he begins to do something very important. he begins to translate Roman text. Okay, that's really, really big. He knew Latin, he could understand Latin, he could read Latin, and because of the recent rediscovery of a lot of these Latin Roman works from the Islamic kingdoms following the Crusades and following these major wars, he starts to come into possession of some ancient Roman texts, like the Histories by Livy or the History by Publius, right? Like he finds all these things and he translates them over, and he starts to realize that an entire world and history existed long before the kingdoms of Christendom inside of Europe. And so with this, he begins to translate these ideas, and it leads to the idea of studying things that aren't just theology, right? Studying history, studying translation, studying law, studying medicine. And so a lot of people refer to him as the father of humanism because of these things. He also is very famous for writing a poem about how he climbed to the top of Mount Ventoux. And at the top of that mountain, when he got there, did he do it to get closer to God? No. Did he do it to go up there as a pilgrimage? No. Did he do it to go up there and to confess his sins? No. He just wanted to see the view. That's a very humanist thing, right? Going up there just to see the gorgeous view. Humanism, in and of its essence, right? And he also leads to the foundation of this thing called the liberal arts, or studying the liberal studies, right? So now looking at this, though, that right there, that is one of the original copies of the Divine Comedy, right? So like that right there, you see that? That's the scene that we talked about. Here's Virgil popping up. There's Dante. There's the leopard, the wolf, and the lion. Or wait, the lion, the leopard, the wolf. And they're the ones that like start the entire journey. Well, looking at this thing really, really quickly, how was this thing made? Oh my God, it was handwritten, right? So the earliest copies of the Divine Comedy were all handwritten. This is from circa 1390, right? So that's handwritten. And also, all of these decorations or pictures that inside of them are hand decorated, right? So making copies of the Divine Comedy early on took forever, right? So, and it made them very expensive, okay? Jot that down. It makes them very, very expensive, okay? So the earliest copies of these things, all those writers that we just talked about, St. Thomas Aquinas, Dante, and Petrarch, all their works took forever to reproduce, okay? But then you had this thing, all right? The printing press, okay? This dynamically changes everything, okay? It changes the Renaissance, it changes the Reformation. This tool, even though ironically enough, it was not really invented by some white guy in Germany, was going to change change everything. Change the spread of information, change the spread of literacy, change the spread of all things. Because the printing revolution, which we believe begins around 1444, give or take, right? So 1444, when this guy named Johannes Gutenberg, right? So a German goldsmith and metalsmith invents this thing known as the printing press, right? So, and the first thing, of course, as we all know, he prints the Bible very, very first, and it makes books cheaper, exposes them all to all classes to literature. The very first book ever printed on it was actually the Bible. It's called the Gutenberg Bible, right? So, and then also, literacy rates are going to be sent through the roof because of the printing press. It's going to make sending mail a more realistic thing. Pamphlets are going to become a very, very important thing. Pamphlets, oh my gosh, pamphlets, right? Pamphlets and propaganda, right? This changes everything. But really quick, going back to what I just said, did he invent the very first printing press? No. The Asians had actually invented the very first printing press hundreds of years before. The problem with the Asiatic printing presses, though, is that they were made using wood, right? So their little blocks that they used were made using wood, right? So what happens with that is the ink gets sucked up into the wood types, and they get kind of brittle, and they start to fall apart over time, which can be a very, very, very big negative, and then it doesn't really have any kind of staying power. Well, Johannes Gutenberg's printing press comes along, and he makes his types out of metal, which is a very, very big difference, right? His metal type printing press was much easier. And the types are individual little letters that are made out of metal. So that's why if you look at your keyboard right now, you have all these letters in front of you. You have a T that's got its own button, you got a G that's got its own button. It's called typing because that's what the printing press was. Metal types. The type was literally a square metal block that had one letter on it. You would line all of them up next to each other with a space in there if you needed to. You would lay ink down on top of it, these little maraca looking things, and you would put paper on and go press, and literally now you have 2 pages in a book, right? So you fold those bad boys together, now you got a pamphlet, okay, which is very, very big and very, very important. That's why it's called typing, though, because it's literally these metal types, okay? Also, fun fact, it's the origin of the names of uppercase and lowercase letters, which is really, really good, and that's because of the fact that the letters were kept on a higher case if they were used more often, right? Hence uppercase, lowercase, right? So, no, excuse me. uppercase letters were not used as often because they're the capital letters that were kept on a higher shelf, and the lowercase letters were used more often for easy reaching, hence why it's called uppercase letters and lowercase letters, right? But we're going to stop there, and we're going to pick it back up on this guy on your next flip over the weekend, and then we're going to get into some more stuff, how the Renaissance is going to spread north, and then we're going to start talking about the Reformation as well, okay? So I will see you guys soon. Get ready for your artwork presentations. Y'all have a good one.